First this morning, Heather Mills was one of the first people to open up on TV about becoming a vegan back in 1993 when she spoke to Lorraine and Dr. Hillary on GMTV. And now Heather has produced a new documentary which explores its benefits.
I think everyone who's vegan has heard the question, where do you get your protein?
The answer is so simple that I feel completely stupid repeating it every time. You know, every single plant food has protein in it. Our largest land animals and strongest land animals on this planet, the elephants and the great apes and giraffes, are all eating plant foods.
In the West, there really are no cases of protein deficiency because we're actually getting an abundance of calories. And we know that Western vegans get more than enough protein.
Well, Heather Mills joins us now. Good morning, Heather. I Could Never Go Vegan, it's called. Why did you feel it was so important to make this film now?
Well, I've been making things behind the scenes for a long time, short documentaries, factual, scientific, backed data, and it was just ignored all the time. And Tom, who you'll see is the director and the narrator and the star of the show, has never eaten meat his whole life. And I just thought it's time for the next generation to prove the facts of what we've been saying for 30 years. There will be no planet in the future unless we cut down hugely on meat and dairy and fish. And if possible, if you've got the willpower and the strength to cut it out completely. But I always advise people to do it slowly. And when you watch the film I Could Never Go Vegan, you'll see how that's so easy and so possible. But there's so much confusion and mixed messaging out on the internet. So it's really, really important that you educate yourself properly. And the doctors and scientists are backing it all up now and having to admit. Whereas when I was on here 30 years ago, it was, well, you have to have milk. Where are you going to get calcium from? Most of the countries that drink the most milk have the highest rates of osteoporosis because it leaches the bones of calcium. So, you know, the Japanese rarely drink milk and they live the longest and healthiest. So there's so much data now.
But I think this is the thing, and you mentioned the sort of the small steps that you can do. If you are sitting at home today and it is a sort of a lifestyle change that you want, but it can sometimes feel overwhelming.
Yeah, so
maybe you're the only person in the family that feels that way and wants to do it. That's particularly difficult to try and shift everything that you're all eating within a household.
Yeah.
It can be tough for people.
That's why we developed all the different V-Bites products of the meat-free, the fish-free, the dairy-free, because you have a stage 1, a stage 2, stage 3. I had to start at stage 3 because I became vegan after losing my leg, weirdly, come back from the war in the former Yugoslavia, and had it chopped off crossing a street in Kensington. And basically, when I came on here, it had only just happened. And it was because veganism actually healed me. And of course, I was a Geordie, meat and mash. And my girlfriend said, I've cured myself of breast cancer. And I went, that's ridiculous. You've got to go vegan. So when you're ill, you'll try anything. So I became a raw vegan for 2 years. But I got bored with it. You know, every time I went out, people just thought I was a rabbit. So that's when I started developing the alternates. Now, they're a million times better than eating meat and dairy for the planet, for the animals and for your body. But they're not as brilliant as eating quinoa and kale and courgette and all these things. So you slowly shift people over. So in the Bronx in New York, the kids were getting $1 a day. So I gave them $1 million worth of vegan alternates and then set up little cafes near McDonald's where they could eat for free. And then we did little blood prick tests. Type 2 diabetes reversed in 3 months. Type 1 down to 2 insulin injections a day. Then we did gut microbiome tests, serotonin connection of brain gut to the head. And eventually, the whole of New York State has a vegan option in every school. So they saw the data, they saw the science over a 4-year period, and they implemented it. The problem in the UK is most of the people that run the heads at MPs and make these powerful decisions are not healthy themselves. So they've got no interest or don't want to know what is required. You know, I went to pick up my friend's dad, who's 86, who just nearly died. And I walked in and they're giving him mince and mash, ice cream and jelly. And I said, he's nearly died. Why are you giving him that? That's what we give him. And of course, you're going to have diarrhea shortly afterwards. The poor nurse has to clean it up. The one time you can control somebody's health is when they're in hospital. That's when they want to learn, that's when they listen. What they do when they go home, you can't have control of. But why would you give somebody pie and mash or steak and chips? It's just archaic, and we need to change that and wipe hundreds of millions of waste off the taxpayers' cost, feeding that junk into the system.
Well, I think, you know, there'll always be people who clearly want to have the pie and mash. That will always
Well,
be
we
an
make
option.
that.
But it's like you say, it's to have also an alternative,
Yeah.
if that is the way that you're wanting to go. Because a lot of people, you get used to what you've been brought up with.
I know. Well, I'm a
It's-
Geordie, so
you know,
yeah.
it's your lifestyle. You don't
Yeah.
really know any difference, and actually, you're quite happy.
Yeah.
So to try and
until
shift,
you're ill.
yes,
And
well,
look at the obesity, look at the illness in England. And the worst thing is, look at what that lack of education is doing to the children, because they then just feed their children the same thing. And we are just growing and growing. And you can get someone that's overweight that is really actually quite healthy, but, and the cholesterol's low, and you can get someone skinny that's really, really sick. When I had Lyme's disease, it wiped out my whole gut. And I couldn't eat food anymore. I had to live off liquid. And that's when I started studying for 15 years what goes on in the gut, what happens with the colon, and started working on which foods are what. So Veganuary, for example, everybody goes from putrefied meat colons straight into shoving loads of vegetables in. That's like, you can't do that. You have to do it slowly,
sort of
otherwise
need
you
to know
get bloated.
the
And then
science
they give
behind
up
it.
on veganism because they're like, oh, I feel
it
uncomfortable.
didn't work for me, but it was the process that
Yeah.
didn't work. I think as well, Heather, you know, it's, listen, you mentioned Lyme disease and the accident and everything else that's happened, and you've lived a life, and you have described yourself before as being resilient. And I think it's probably the best word to describe you, because a lot has happened in a very short time for you, really. And here we are talking about another passion project of yours.
Well, if you don't make a difference while you're here, what are you here for? If you're not going to actually think outside the box. People say, how do you overcome all this adversity? Because I'm not focused on myself. If you stop thinking about the self-absorption of oneself, and you actually get on and do things, then that's actually, you know, a powerful drug.
I mean, you look great. You're obviously in a very...
I'm 56 now.
Well, you look fantastic. You're obviously in a very happy place. Do you
Yeah.
feel that way yourself?
I am really, really happy at the moment. I mean, you know, I've been through all these roller coasters, but it is interesting, you know, karma and justice comes around in the end, and it could take, when someone's feeling really dark or really low, you've always got to remember, just hang on in there, that time will pass. I've got loads of girlfriends going through perimenopause and menopause, being misdiagnosed with depression instead of just having estrogen, testosterone and progesterone tests, which can sort them out. So there are so many simple solutions that could be happening in the NHS that are cost effective for a domino effect of people being able to go back to work. It's a bit like when I lost my leg. They gave me a useless limb, so I developed all the limbs you see on the Paralympics and everything, so that people could become active and contribute to society.
Yeah, of course. And a new love in your life, I believe.
Not so
which
new,
is-
5 years ago.
Well, there you go.
Don't really talk about him because I really respect people's privacy. But yeah,
Absolutely. But it's all part
met
of-
on a train, and
The beginning of
so
every best
it
romance.
doesn't have to be a dating app. Go and just chat to somebody.
Travel.
Yeah, exactly. You see all these people hanging out on the platforms now.
Yeah, exactly. There we go. It's better than the app, like you say. Now, you mentioned Dr. Hillary, and back in the day, you tried to convince them all the years ago. This was you doing a very good job at it.
They give me a thing called wheatgrass, which is here, which
Wheatgrass.
I had to freeze to bring back from
Right, can you not
America.
buy this over here?
You can't. You can grow it for pennies.
Do you remember that, Hillary?
I do, I do. And even more, I remember us doing Dancing on Ice a few
my
years
God.
ago together, the same series.
We've had no time to put our skates on.
We're trying to forget that, aren't we?
I've just recovered with my ribs. Yeah, no, it was good fun,
Exactly.
though. It was
It
great.
was good fun.
great.
And it's really interesting listening to you and talking about veganism. And of course, we need to introduce more plant-based foods into our diet. We've got an epidemic of obesity and diabetes. However, a little caveat is, you know, you can eat a vegan diet which isn't necessarily healthy. Ultra-processed foods are possible. You could live on chips, but that's vegan, but not necessarily healthy. So a good balance. And you need to really find out about your stuff because it's easy to miss out on vitamin B12 and iron if you're not getting that
But loads
elsewhere.
of meat eaters are really low on B12 generally.
Yeah, they can
from
be.
the
It is
science
doing,
study.
it's doing the research and being
So
slightly
it's
more
learning as much
scientific
as you
about
can,
what you're
Yeah.
eating.
so
all
you
of us.
don't get any
For all of
nutritional
us.
deficiencies.
Heather, thank you very much. I Could Never Go Vegan will be in cinemas on the 19th of April. Thank you so much,
Good luck with
Heather.
that.
Thank you, Hilary. Seeing you later. You're not going anywhere
Indeed,
just
yeah.
yet.